Welcome to the God with Us podcast. Today, we're launching season number 2, and we're going to be talking about integrating imagination and intellect and a whole bunch of other things. So, welcome to season. I am Jeff Holzclaw. This is Sid Holzclaw. This is
Hello.
our second season of the God with Us podcast. And for all of you who might be new, why don't we just introduce ourselves? And then, Sid, you're going to talk all about what this season is about. So, we are, again, the Holzclaws. We are local church pastors here in Grand Rapids at a vineyard church. I'm
Grand
also
Rapids,
Grand
Michigan.
Rapids, Michigan. I'm also a theology professor at Northern Seminary, where I teach theology and culture and other things. I am launching a new kind of endeavor called Grassroots Theology, which is growing theology for everyday people. And you do a bunch of stuff too. What else do you do besides local church pastoring?
Yeah, I am a coach with several different networks and on my own. So I coach with the Jesus Collective and Ecclesia Network and Gravity Leadership. And I'm doing some other things, which I'll talk about in the episode today. And I'm also a spiritual director.
Right. Perfect. Good.
And we
Well,
also homeschool our kids. We
yes.
have 2 more years.
And in our first season, we talked about different things related to our book that came out, Humanity, being made in the image of God.
It's right here
And
on the
there we go.
shelf.
It's on the shelf. Yeah, we're in our new studio. For those of you in the podcast world, we're also broadcasting this live on Facebook and on YouTube. So we have this new swanky studio with our book, but also some art of one of our children kind of thrown out there. So you can find that. In the first season, we talked about um, different relational skills, cognitive things, neuroscience, and all that stuff. We talked about being made in God's image and how that affects our parenting and marriages and all those types of things. Then we launched our book, which is Does God Really Like Me? In January. And then this global pandemic hit and disrupted all of our lives. And so we spent about the last 9 months not producing our podcast. But
Yes.
now here we are. Season 2 is launching and we're super excited. Sid, what is this mostly about this season?
Yeah. So this season, I went through the spiritual exercises of Ignatius of Loyola last year in sort of an abbreviated way at the beginning and an extended way at the end. There are several different annotations that take different amounts of time. So I did that last year and just I found that it was a really incredible way to integrate everything that I was learning about neuroscience, everything about God with us, things that Jeff and I had been talking about with attachment theory, the ways to they're just theological and systematic theology backgrounds, and then just integrating that with our daily lives. So you have to forgive me. I feel a little bit freaked out knowing that this is a one take, totally live. We never get to go
That's
back and
right.
change anything. So
We're
I'm
changing
trying
our
not to.
format. We're just going live.
That's new for me.
Why
So,
don't you scoot in a little bit for that? There you
oh,
go. Right
okay.
there. There
I
you go.
guess visually I
Yeah,
wasn't in the
we're
right
still
place.
fixing
So
it.
all that stuff is new. So yeah, so that's what we're doing this season is talking more about integrating everything that we are learning and all of the different things that we are doing and the experiences that we're having in our daily life and sort of using the Ignatian practices, the exercises as a way, as sort of a gateway to those other conversations.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So we're going to be specifically focused on something, which are the spiritual practices. But we're going to use that as a way of churning up all the other things in our lives, the things we're thinking and reading about. And so it should be really great. What about those who don't know anything about spiritual practices, maybe even aren't following Jesus that closely? Like,
Okay,
why
well,
might
that's
this?
actually
Oh, am I
not the way.
jumping
Yeah,
ahead?
no, that's actually not the way I want to lead into this
Okay, go ahead.
conversation. So, all right, I have a lot to say. So
Part
I'm
of
not.
season 2 is Jeff taking a little bit of the back seat in the production, being a little less Enneagram 3 achiever and just kind of rolling with it. So I was like trying to drive the
Ooh, that'll be
conversation,
good work in your life,
but here
honey.
we go. I'm handing it over to Sid
Yeah.
to
So the way that this is sort of coming, the lead in here is that one of the things that I am doing right now is I am co-leading a coaching training with some friends of mine in Canada. And you can find that resource in the show notes, but it's called Transformational Coaching. And the whole principle behind the thing is that as coaches, because I am a coach, as coaches, we lead through our own transformation. We're only capable of being able to create space for other people to be transformed if we're willing to put our own transformation first, prioritize our own transformation. And so the first posture, there are several postures that we teach in the course, and the first one is a commitment to our own transformation. And so this spiritual exercises is a commitment to my own transformation. But so there's a quote from Richard Rohr, and I'm sorry, I don't know which of his books it's from. But he said, if you're lucky, God will lead you to a situation you cannot control, you cannot fix, and you cannot even understand. At that point, true spirituality begins. Up to that point is all just preparation. And I think that's really appropriate for the time that we're living in this COVID pandemic. And there's this crazy election coming up. And I think there are a whole lot of things that we cannot control and we cannot fix and we cannot even understand. And so this feels like a prime moment where God has led us to these situations that are completely outside of our illusions of being able to control. And that it's like moments like this and hardship and challenge or things that feel outside of our control. It's like we cannot hide who we are, who we have become. All of the ugly, all of the untransformed comes out in seasons like this. And so it just, for me especially, has brought me back in touch with, I want to continue to commit to transformation because I do not want all of these things that have sort of been lurking under the surface that are sort of being pulled out with COVID and several other things that are going on in our lives. I'm noticing there's still so much more of me that needs to be transformed. So the Ignatian exercises are another invitation. I'm doing them again, and it's an invitation again to be transformed and allow God to meet me in all of the places that still need transformation.
I like it. So we got another I. So it's an invitation
There
to
you go.
transformation while we integrate our intellects
And imagination. So we got some shuns too.
Boom.
Yes, there we
I
go.
love it.
Nice. Jeff is all about
All right,
work.
so an
We love
invitation to
words.
transformation. Maybe that's like our whole theme for this season. I like it.
Yeah, that is a good thing. We should change the title. It's too late,
No,
right?
it's too late.
All right. Well, anyway.
Keep moving forward.
All right. So I also partner with Gravity Leadership, and one of their axioms that they found everything on is what God does through you, he also does in you. And the flip side of that is what God does in you, he wants to do through you. And so this idea that they have this great quote that transformational leadership is much more like telling people about the amazing restaurant you dined at last night than it is about trying to sell timeshares to a resort you never intend to visit.
Ooh,
isn't that a good one?
like
Way to go, Matt and Ben. So who we are becoming is a lot more important than what we're accomplishing. And so this season, we want to talk a lot about who we are becoming, an invitation to transformation. Yes.
I like it.
So then along with that, I am also taking this class called the Neuroscience of Change by this organization called Coaches Rising. And I'm learning in that course more about neuroscience, which Jeff, you already know, Jeff and I are fascinated by. And some things that have stood out to me in the past couple sessions of the class is that between a quarter and a third of our brains are devoted to visual processing. So first of all, whenever I do the Ignatian exercises, I have my eyes closed. So I've shut off. I have access to a quarter and a third of my brain that I wouldn't have access to if it was visually processing. And then I'm also learning about all these different ways of perceiving. So there are like 5 different ways that we can perceive the world around of us. One of them is through our 5 senses, which is what we would normally think about, and that's called exteroception. And then there's also the things that are happening inside of our skin, like our visceral what's the word I'm looking for? Stimulus, visceral stimulus. That's interoception. And then we have this sense of our body in space, which is proprioception. And then we also have conceptual perception, which is our understanding in our heads, which is what
representations.
Yep. And then we also have our emotional perception of like so
you're saying we don't just have 5 senses.
We don't just have
There's
5 senses. We actually have 5 systems of sensing.
Ooh,
nice, huh?
I like it.
Yeah. And so we have this felt experience, all these different ways of perceiving felt experience. And then we have thinking networks. And when we're engaged in our thinking network, it's literally a different neural network than any of these other felt experiences. And so when we're engaged in intense thinking, we kind of lose access to the rest of those networks. And so one of the things that I think is so cool about the Ignatian spiritual exercises and any form of contemplation is that it sort of gets us out of our thinking network and allows us to also have access to our felt experience. Now, why would that matter? Why would we want to do that, Jeff?
Why would we want to get out of
Why would we
our
want to get out of our
thinking
heads?
and our heads and move into our hearts, as some people say?
Yes. Why is that important?
Because we need to be fully integrated beings, because God made us with all of these parts, not just with a giant brain. So he must have thought that they were important for us. And because those other ways, I believe, are one of the primary ways we actually connect with other people. And so when we're not integrating all the different systems, we're actually losing out the ability to understand, to empathize, and engage with other people. And I believe we're kind of made for relationships.
Yeah.
I just made all that up, but did that fit?
That fit. Nice work. Yes, it's all about integration. God created us with the ability to perceive in all these different ways. And that must mean that we can perceive his presence and his love for us and his desire to be with us in all of these different ways and not just in our intellects. Would you agree with that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So that's why we're going to that's why we're going to go through the Ignatian spiritual exercise. I
There you
get all
go.
tongue tied because anyway. All right. So the exercises,
She'll get better
the
the more she does
purpose
it,
of
folks.
the purpose of the Ignatian exercises is really about growing your union with God. And so it's encountering God in these imaginative and exploratory kind of ways so that we can think and act more like Jesus as we spend more time in his presence, which then frees us to make more Jesus-centered decisions. So, but which would also lead us to love other people like Jesus does.
Amen.
So, in the book that I am using, which is The Ignatian Adventure by Kevin O'Brien. In this book, he talks about the Ignatian exercises are also like a school of prayer. And there's a twofold way of being schooled in prayer. One of them is through meditation, which is more of the intellect, which is different than what you might think of when you think of like Eastern meditation, like Buddhist meditation. It's not that. When he's talking about meditation, it's using our intellect to read, to pray over words and images and ideas. It's that conceptual part of us. It's engaging our memory of the day to sort of look for where did we see God in this day. It's appreciating how God was a part of our life. And it's also gaining these insights about who is God and who am I. So that's the sort of meditation part of the school of prayer. And then the second part of it is the contemplative part. And the contemplative part is more about feeling. So we've got the intellect in the meditation and then the imagination and the feeling in the contemplation. And so this is where we're actually placing ourselves in scripture and imagining that we were there walking around in these narratives that we see in scripture. And so the idea is to experience what it might have been like to actually have been there, to have met Jesus in the streets of Jerusalem, or to have been there when he was teaching at the Sermon on the Mount, to have been actually participating in the lives of the people that we are in when we read in scripture. And then also pulling that into the present of like, what would it be like if
really
Jesus
quick,
met me in the same way today?
About the imagination, some people think, well, imagination is fake, so why would we use the imagination to connect with God?
Good
But
question.
actually, God uses the imagination all the time in order to connect with us. So we have lots of poetry where it speaks of God being a high tower, being a good shepherd, and all these types of things. And when God speaks prophetically to different people, he tells them to go and look at things like the potter's wheel that I think we'll be talking about in an episode or two, or God will kind of reveal something to somebody. And so I think this idea that the imagination is where fake stuff happens, but only God deals with like facts and truth, or what's in the real world. Certainly God does do that, but God uses the imagination in order to give us more nuance, or to give us breakthroughs in our understanding, or to lead us into a new way.
Right. He's always calling forth metaphors and images and engaging our imagination in ways that give us a richer and deeper understanding than just intellect.
All right.
Yeah.
What was the next point?
So, so the last part is that the exercises are organized into what are called 4 weeks with preparation before that. So I won't get into all of that structure. But so at the beginning of the season, we're going to be spending the first couple of episodes talking about preparing ourselves for what is to come, and the
The
preparation,
invitation to
the
transformation.
invitation to transformation. So we're going to be centering a lot on God's unconditional love, his ongoing work of creation. Basically, who is this God that is inviting us, and why would we want to even respond? So
Mm,
that's sort of what the
amen.
beginning couple episodes will be about. So I'm looking forward to this season. I think it's going to be a whole lot of fun, and I think it's going to be really fun to pull Jeff out of his intellect a little bit. I think it'll be
I'm going to
fun.
try to do my best to follow along with the weekly readings. Um, but the invitation to transformation and these other type of things, I was thinking, well, what about for like the spiritual seekers? What about for those who are newer in faith? Is there a place for them to kind of join or to experience these things? And I would say, yes, I think for the
Yes.
spiritual seekers, engaging your mind in meditation, like just arguments for or against God or those type of things are important, but those aren't necessarily, you know, ways of finding out who God is and how he wants to kind of speak or be with you. Also,
Yeah.
we found that even if you're agnostic about God's existence, I think, and this will be a conversation maybe we should have, going through spiritual exercises like this, I think would still be transformative. So even if you're not sure God exists, but you long for transformation in your life, you know, this is a conversation we could have. Maybe we could have other people join in, have some guests, but is there an agnostic kind of place for people in these, or is that totally outside, you know,
No,
the
I
spiritual realm
I
there?
think, I mean, if you think about, because really, a life lived with God is all about relationship. And so if you think about how do you decide if you want to be in a relationship with a person, it all begins with being introduced and getting to know the person before you decide whether or not you want to be in a relationship with that person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this will be an opportunity to be introduced to the God that we know and love, and an opportunity to learn more about who he is and how he relates with us, and the patterns of relating that we see in his other relationships. And I feel like it'd be a great opportunity for people who are exploring and wondering about who God is. And
Yeah,
yeah.
great. Well, so again, a couple housekeeping details. We are pushing this out live on Facebook through Sid's profile. No, I always get them wrong. Her professional page, and there's actually I'm not, you know,
Because I'm oh
Sid
so
didn't want to know this
professional.
till right now, but there's actually 3 people watching live
Oh,
right now. I don't know who they
hi,
are, but
whoever you
I have
are.
a little number.
Thank you for watching.
You can also get this on YouTube on my YouTube page, Jeffrey Holsclaw or Jeff Holsclaw. And then it'll obviously be on our regular podcast feed, which you can find on Spotify. You can find on iTunes. It's the God with Us podcast. So please subscribe to all those. Please share them and things like that.
And our goal is to try to do one episode a week.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We'll see
So we're
how
going to
that
get back to
goes.
our weekly practice, hopefully on Mondays at this time. And there'll be a couple episodes coming out right away.
Yes.
Any last thoughts?
No,
She
that's
says
my
no.
last thought. I'm excited.
She says no. All right. Well, thanks again for tuning in for those of you who are listening live. And please listen and share and subscribe.
We'll see you next time.